Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 323. I am your host, Reed Murphy.
I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Look at the show. I'm the captain. Welcome to the fucking show. Fuck Scott.
That's right, folks. Welcome to the latest installment of College Shame Day, presented by the 323 Network. I am your host, Scott Ellia, and I am on my own this evening because apparently Reed wants to go watch high school football. Whoa. Whatever. He enjoys it. He deserves a night off. But before we get into what's going to be coming up this weekend on this week 8 of college football, a couple news stories broke as of late. For one, looks like the negligence claims against ex-Baylor coach Art Briles have been dismissed. I mean, it's only been about 10 years since this all started coming out. But yes, a federal judge recently ruled that former Baylor football coach Art Briles was not negligent in the 2014 case involving a female student's report of being physically assaulted by one of his players. The judge dismissed gross negligence claims against Briles, not only him, but also former athletic director Ian McCaw and Baylor University, stating that there was insufficient evidence to conclude they were grossly negligent. You really feel for the plaintiff, Dolores Lozano. You know, she will proceed with a Title IX claim and one negligence claim against Baylor in front of a jury here at a later date. But when things like this happen, you really want to see some kind of finality, some kind of closing of the chapter, something positive to come out of this, not just saying, oh, he's okay, he can go, he wasn't at fault kind of thing. You want some kind of outcome for the plaintiff. Now, of course, Ian McCaw testified that he took appropriate actions upon receiving the report of Lozano's allegations in 2014, and Briles claimed that he had no knowledge of Lozano's claim reports against the player until her lawsuit in 2016. So like I said, it's been damn near 10 years, and we're finally getting to this point. Now, of course, it really may impact Briles' reputation, but it doesn't address the broader sexual assault issues at Baylor, who have previously acknowledged its failures in responding to sexual violence incidents, but argue that they handled Lozano's case correctly. And I don't feel that's accurate, because if they did handle it correctly, should we really still be seeing it this later? Like I said, almost 10 years later. And yeah, Briles' reputation should have some kind of a upswing from here on out, from no longer being pinned in this, but it's still gonna be something that's gonna taint him from the future. Speak about tainting, Michigan and stealing signs. It's another news story that broke as of late, and this one doesn't make any sense to me at all, because anybody who is around any kind of sports, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, hockey, any badminton, anything and everything, you always need to get a competitive advantage over your opponent. And one easy way of doing that is scouting your opponent. Yes, the NCAA has rules against in-person scouting. I get it, for folks that you're going to have playing in that same season. But that doesn't mean anything that you can play them later down the road, say the college football playoff. So could Michigan be doing this against teams like, I don't know, Florida State or Washington or Georgia? You know, teams that they're not playing this year, but they could see in the college football. That would be okay according to the rule. But the rule is bogus. I mean, you had numerous athletes coming out speaking against this absolutely asinine investigation by the NCAA. J.J. Watt and Robert Griffin III being two major proponents. Because at the end of the day, this is scouting. You're scouting other teams, trying to figure out what packages they're running, what signs they might be using to try to tip their hand a little bit. And if anything, it should shine more light onto teams as a whole to figure out a better way to communicate on the field without putting those massive 10 by 10 cue cards. But it looks like NCAA might have gotten their scapegoat in Michigan football analyst Connor Stallions, who has now been suspended due to the investigation of the alleged sign-stealing operation by the Wolverines. Of course, the Wolverines are being accused of using an elaborate scouting system to steal signs from opponents, not just this year, but stemming all the way back from 2021. And of course, Jim Harbaugh denies knowledge of the alleged scheme and expresses his cooperation with the investigation, which is good for him because homeboy has been under a microscope as of late. For those who are regular listeners to the show and those who watch college football closely already know that Harbaugh just got off his previously 3-game suspension that was related to NCAA charges of recruiting violations. So it's just one more knock against the Michigan Wolverine football squad. And especially if you're one of these teams on the outside looking in from the top 4 that are going to go to the college football playoff, say in Oklahoma, for instance, if Oklahoma's 5 or 6, do you think they're going to call foul and kind of complain that Michigan's getting in regardless of what's going on with this whole investigation? Now, Michigan and the Big Ten have been informed of the investigation as well as future opponents, including this week's opponent, Michigan State, who released a statement that they're even contemplating boycotting the game and not even going out of fear for their players, which is kind of silly. If anything, you're probably putting more of a target on their back against Michigan if they don't want to come out and play. But hey, more to come with this. If anything, we're 8 weeks into college football season, and these crazy off-the-wall stories haven't stopped. And also, as a little bit of upkeep from last week's games, it was another exciting week. Nothing really too crazy or, out of the ordinary. A lot of teams completely routing their little brothers. For instance, Georgia over Vanderbilt, 37-20. You have that Michigan team completely trouncing Indiana 52-7, and Ohio State beating the brakes off of Purdue 41-7. After that, Florida State at home coming off a bye, beating Syracuse 41-3. Penn State over UMass 63-0. No surprise there. UMass is one of the worst college football teams in the nation as of right now. The ESPN College Game Day game of the week, the Washington Huskies over the Oregon Ducks 36-33. And a game that Scott doesn't care about, Notre Dame over USC 48-20. It's 2 teams I couldn't care less about. Alabama barely squeaking away from a very underwhelming Arkansas team this year. They're 2-5. They dropped another game to Alabama 24-21. You got KJ Jefferson there. You got a lot of talent on that Arkansas Razorback team. And it just goes to show you how competitive the SEC is. And you really need to be firing up all cylinders every single week to maintain any kind of relevance. But I see a lot of those players being able to get to the next level in the NFL and produce. Now, the college shame day game of the week, the UNC Tar Heels at home against the Miami Hurricanes. UNC is the victor, 41-31. We'll get into a little bit more detail here in a little bit. And then rounding it out, Pittsburgh with the upset victory over number 14 Louisville, 38-21. Congrats to Pitt. Oregon State over UCLA, 36-24. Utah, number 16 Utah over Cal, 34-14. Duke still performing very well, beating NC State 24-3. Tennessee over Texas A&M, 20-13. Good. Fuck Jimbo Fisher. He doesn't deserve to be at Texas A&M, and hopefully this is kind of the writing on the wall to get him out, even though he does have a hefty price tag as far as a buyout goes, which we might get into next week. There's some rumors circulating right now in college football, so we'll probably get into that next week. Washington State, unfortunately, dropping another game, and this time to Arizona, 44-6. LSU over Auburn, 48-18. And another pair of upsets, Oklahoma State over Kansas, 39-32. If those of you who listened last week caught my little tip while going through these games that I was calling that upset, I was not shocked. And then, of course, Missouri beating Kentucky on the road, 38-21 to round out your Week 7 games. Oh, folks, when you hear that music, the dust is rolling in. The barn doors are swinging open, and it can only mean one thing. It's time for college shame days. Shameful 8. That's right, the top 8 college football programs as of right now. This list has been changing quite frequently week to week. And this one is actually relatively close to the AP poll, which I'm kind of upset about with myself. But hey, you can't win them all. But to go into it a little bit deeper, we're going to start at number 8 and work our way up. At number 8 right now, we have the Oregon Ducks. Yes, they had that tough loss last week late against Washington, but they're back at it this week against Washington State at home. They should be able to right the ship, especially when they have the number 1 points for in the league of college football with 48.5 points per game. And they're only allowing about 15.5 to 16 points a game to their opponents. So they're kind of flirting with that top 10 production on that side of the ball. Moving to number 7, we are going to Penn State. I'm keeping them at 7 because they just went to the bakery for some cupcakes last week with that absolutely dismantling of the UMass Minutemen 63-0. And they haven't really been tested this year. Like I talked about last week, their most quote-unquote impressive win to me was against a meh Iowa team. Yes, they are one of the top scoring teams in the nation in the top 5. And yes, they are the second best team when it comes to points scored against them. But like I said, this week's game is going to be their biggest test yet against Ohio State, which we'll get into here in a second. But before we get into that, let's get into number 6, and that was the Oklahoma Sooners. They got a little rest last week. They had their bye week after a well-deserved Red River rivalry victory over Texas. They're back at it this week at home against UCF. They're looking dominant and could make a push into that top 4 easily with some of these teams really schedules starting to really heat up now. Another one of those teams that are posting really great, top 5 in points for, top 10 in the points against column. Moving forward to number 5, it is the Ohio State Buckeyes. They won with no issues on the road against Purdue last week, 41-7. And of course, this is College Game Day's game of the week against Penn State at home. Offense is looking meh. They're only putting up about 36 points a game. That's kind of in the top 20, the top 30 range. But nobody's really been able to score on them. They're only allowing sub 10 points a game, but now that they're going against Penn State, who put up points on everybody, it should be a very interesting game. I'm excited to watch that. And honestly, I don't care who wins. Neither team I have the respect for my own personal reasons. But moving to number 4 for a team that I do have the utmost respect for, the Florida State Seminoles. Last week, coming off their bye, absolutely dismantling Syracuse at home 41-3. Up next is number 16 Duke at home. I feel like they can continue the momentum. They're doing really great on the offensive side of the ball. I really want to get their defense up and running and kind of doing a little bit more. They're still allowing a little bit too many points for comfort this late into the season. So hopefully they can get something going there, which brings us to the top 3. That's right, the top 3 in the Shameful 8. Number 3, we have Washington. After that thrilling late game victory over Oregon last week, Arizona State is up next at home this week. Yes, they are another one of those teams in the top 5 as far as points scored, but their defense is just hemorrhaging points. I think they're ranked right now 43rd, giving up about 20 to 21 points a game. So hopefully they can figure it out, because that's one team I could see kind of slowly falling down this ranking as the season goes on. Moving on to number 2, we got the Georgia Bulldogs. I'm going to keep them there. I learned my lesson last week by not having them in the top 8, and they came out. But it's going to be interesting from here on out, because they lost tight end Brock Bowers early with a high ankle sprain, who has now underwent surgery. But there's no timetable for a return. And honestly, if I'm Brock Bowers, I already know I'm a guaranteed lock for the NFL draft at the next level. I'm not risking coming back for another title. I've already got 2 under my belt. Do I really need a third? And of course, they edged out Vandy 37-20 on the road. They got a bye week this week, but they'll be back next week at home against Florida. Which brings us to number 1, a team that we've already talked about today in this show, and that is the Michigan Wolverines. crushing Indiana 52-7 at home last week. Like I mentioned, they have Michigan State this week on the road. But I could see this being a trap game for Michigan, with all the cheating allegations and the investigations swirling around and, Jim Harbaugh getting back in the swing of things, back on the sideline. They have a top 10 offense in points, and they are the number one team when it comes to points scored against them at 6.5. With everything going on in Michigan State we've talked about before, it's going to be a very interesting game. I will say that at the very least. And let's look at this Heisman race. It's heating up. It is heating up for sure. A lot of movement. I'm actually putting Bo Nix back at number 5 on my Heisman watch. Last week, posting 33 for 44 for 330 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions at Washington, which puts him on the year 164 for 207, 1,700 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So good for Bo. Moving to number 4, we got Dylan Gabriel of Oklahoma. Last week, like I said, it was his bye week, but he's been posting very impressive numbers as of so far. 141 for 195, 1,800 yards passing, 16 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Number 3, this is where you're going to see a little bit of a slip. I don't know what Caleb Williams and USC are doing out there. Last week, he got exposed. 23 for 37, 199 for 1 touchdown and 3 picks on the road against Notre Dame. Yes, if you look at his season stats, he's still performing very well. 142 for 203, just over 2,000 yards, 23 touchdowns and 4 picks. So hopefully they can correct the course there at USC if he wants to go at being the repeat Heisman Trophy winner, which I don't feel like he's going to because, Jaden Daniels, who I feel has jumped him in the rankings. Last week, 20 for 27, 325, 3 touchdowns, and a pick against Auburn, which on the year pushes him to 152 for 208, over 2,200 yards passing, 22 touchdowns, and 3 picks. And then, of course, we have the cream of the crop that rises to the top. That is Michael Penix Jr. of Washington, who last week posted 22 for 37, 302 for 4 touchdowns, and a pick against Oregon, which now on the year posts 155 for 215, 2,300 yards passing, 20 touchdowns, 3 picks, and I do not see this offense slowing down. I think the Pac-12 is wide open, especially with USC dropping a lot of these games that they really shouldn't have. So we can only hope that they're able to hold on for the rest of the season. Cue the band. It's time for Game of the Week. Before we get into who this week's College Shame Day Game of the Week is going to be, last week we had number 25 Miami at number 12 UNC, and thankfully UNC got that victory 41-31 over Miami because fuck the Hurricanes. They don't deserve anything. Miami quarterback Tyler Van Dyke had a pretty honorable game, posted 391 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 picks. But welcome back, Tez Walker. Holy crap. 6 receptions for 132 and 3 touchdowns. He is that man. Mama stop him. I am now slightly concerned as a Florida State fan, potentially playing UNC in the ACC championship game, because that is one dynamic player that UNC got back on the offensive side of the ball, and I'm very excited to see what he's able to do as production goes and how much that propels Drake May into the future Heisman conversation. But for eagle-eared listeners out there who have been listening to this music, who know what these fight songs are, don't spoil it for the rest of everybody. I'm going to spoil it, because this week's Game of the Week is number 22 Air Force. That's right, Air Force at Navy. Everyone's thinking, Scott, why Air Force? They're 6-0, guys. 6-0, number 1 in the Mountain West. They're the top 20 as far as points for, and the top 10 as far as points against, but they have the number 1 rushing offense in college football, averaging about 334 yards a game, led by fullback. That's right, you heard me, fullback Emmanuel Michel. Don't get it confused with Sodi Michel. There's no relation. I already checked. Don't bother even looking it up. But on the season, he's carried the ball 113 times for 497 yards and 8 touchdowns. And you're probably sitting there thinking, Scott, what's Navy got? Navy has a rushing offense too. Yes, they're 3-3. They're kind of in the middle of the road as far as the American Conference goes, but they are in the top 5 as far as rushing goes, averaging about 235 yards a game, led by, again, fullback. That's right, 2 fullbacks. Who ever thought we'd be talking about fullbacks? For folks who listened to the latest Ricks versus Gricks episodes, Taylor Swift came up again, and I can tell you one thing, that is not one fullback. I tried to get a joke in, and it just didn't work, but oh well, whatever. But going back to the fullback, Alex Texa, I'm going to butcher the name anyways, but 62 carries, 503 yards, and 4 touchdowns on the year. This is going to be a very, very exciting game. Oh, that's right. The lames of the week. Last week's, as you remember it, the game was so lame it already happened before the show even came out, and that was Louisiana Tech at Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee won 31-23. Same thing this week, folks. Game was so lame. Already happened. FIU, Florida International University, traveling to Sam Houston. And FIU won 33-27. Whoop-de-doo. Oh, folks, but to close out the show, the most exciting point of College Shame Day. And for those of you who are listening for the first time, don't miss out on any of the excitement. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 323 College Shame Day. You can also find us at 323 Read on the main 323 Network channel. Subscribe to the 323 Network on YouTube and catch our podcast on all major podcast platforms. You know what? Be a part of the conversation. Be a part of a growing community of sports enthusiasts and curious minds. That's right, curious minds. But there's one thing that I am curious about right now, and that's what does the fates have in store for me on this week's Wheel of Degenerate? Last week, we're not talking about last week. Not talking about it. Of course, Scott lost again. And I can't keep doing this. I got to hit 1. To remind everybody, we had Georgia. We took the spread at minus 31.5. They didn't cover. We took Oregon straight up, didn't hit. Took Purdue straight up, didn't hit. But we did hit on Arizona and Missouri. We did get them in there, so congrats to me. Pats on backs, that's right. And this week, it looks even more juicy and titillating. Ooh, titillating. Scott sounds a little bit dirty, but hey, whatever. Starting off, ESPN College Game Days Game of the Week, number 7, Penn State at number 3, Ohio State. We got UCF traveling to number 6, Oklahoma. College Shame Days, the only shameful thing that you need to worry about. Game of the Week, number 22, Air Force at Navy. Then we got Washington State at number 9, Oregon. Number 17, Tennessee at number 11, Alabama. South Carolina at number 20, Missouri. North Texas at 23, Tulane. Minnesota at number 24, Iowa. Number 8, Texas at Houston. Virginia at number 10, UNC. 13, Ole Miss at Auburn. Number 2, Michigan at Michigan State. Number 16, Duke at number 4, Florida State. Army at number 19, LSU. And side note to that game, if anyone hasn't looked it up yet, go check out LSU's graphics for their end zones with this Army game. It is chef's kiss all around. It is amazing. LSU and camo colors. It actually looks really clean. So tip of the hat to them. And then round out the rest of this week's games. We got 14 Utah, 18 USC, Arizona State at number 5 Washington, and number 25 UCLA at Stanford. But let's add the wheel to the stage, folks. Ooh, look at that wheel. It's so pretty. Let's give this a spin. Let's see. The first game on the College Shame Days Wheel of Degenerate betting slip is... Wow. We were giving all that hype, and I'm actually going to get them. We're going to take Army at number 19, LSU, for the first game on the ticket. Let's take them out there, and let's give it another spin. Number 2 on the Wheel of Degenerate betting slip is going to be... Looks like we are traveling this week, folks. And that's number 7, Penn State at number 3, Ohio State. We're going to be sitting there with everyone from ESPN. Hooray. Love that. Not really, but hey, number 3. Ooh, this is going to be a very interesting game. Number 3 on the betting slip this week, folks, is Washington State at number 9, Oregon. Oregon has been slipping as of late. Washington State is looking to try to make a comeback in the Pac-12 as the little guy, so it could be a potential upset alert. And for those who this is your first time joining in, I will not give you my picks for these games live with you here on this show. The only place to find that is on Instagram at 323 College Shame Day. The show gets released sometime Saturday morning, and then I'll typically these picks will post around 10:30, 11, so that way folks who want to join in my misery and lose some money, it'll be available for you at that point in time. But number 4 on the ticket is Minnesota at number 24, Iowa. We already talked about Iowa before, a very lackluster team. I could very easily see them dropping this game against the Golden Gophers in Minnesota. But before we announce the 5th and final pick, just to recap, we have Army at 19, LSU, Minnesota at number 24, Iowa, Washington State at number 9, Oregon, number 7, Penn State at number 3, Ohio State. And to round it out, every week, they're on my goddamn ticket. And that's number 14, Utah at number 18, USC. They can't keep getting away with this. I'm going to have to hit this right at one point. But man, whatever. Get the wheel out of my face. I don't even want to look at the wheel anymore. But that is right, folks. Just to recap, the 5 games that will be on College Shame Day's Wheel of Degenerate betting slip of the week. Number 7, Penn State at 3, Ohio State. Washington State at number 9, Oregon. Minnesota at 24, Iowa. Army at number 19, LSU. And number 14, Utah at number 18, USC. These picks will be made available to you on our official Instagram page at 323 College Shame Day. You can also find us at 323 Read on Facebook and Instagram as well at the 323 Network. And like I mentioned before, come join the community. Come join the conversation with us. Check us out, the 323 Network on YouTube channel. Catch all our podcasts wherever you may find them. I don't care. I listen to them on Spotify. If you're one of those Apple Podcast folk, have at it. Who am I to judge? But the only advice I give you every single week is that if you're not going to be good, make sure to be good at it. Have a shameful day.
Fuck Scott. Yeah, I like that.